Surtsey is a volcanic island located in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago off the southern coast of Iceland. At 63.303 a degree N 20.605 a degree W/63.303 minus 20.605, Surtsey is the southernmost point of Iceland. It was formed in a volcanic eruption which began 130 meters below sea level, and reached the surface on November 14, 1963. The eruption lasted until June 5, 1967, when the island reached its maximum size of 2.7 kilometers (2). Since then, wave erosion has caused the island to steadily diminish in size. As of 2002, its surface area was 1.4 kilometers (2). The most recent survey shows the island's maximum elevation at 155 m above sea level. The new island was named after Surtr, a fire jar paragraph jötunn or giant from Norse mythology. It was intensively studied by volcanologists during its eruption, and afterwards by botanists and other biologists as life forms gradually colonized the originally barren island. The undersea vents that produced Surtsey are part of the Vestmannaeyjar submarine volcanic system, part of the fissure of the seafloor called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Vestmannaeyjar also produced the famous eruption of Eldfell on the island of Heimaey in 1973. The eruption that created Surtsey also created a few other small islands along this volcanic chain, such as Jólnir and unnamed other peaks. Most of these eroded away fairly quickly. Geology formation the eruption was unexpected, and almost certainly began some days before it became apparent at the surface. The seafloor at the eruption site is 130 meters below sea level, and at this depth volcanic emissions and explosions would be suppressed, quenched and dissipated by the water pressure and density. Gradually, as repeated flows built up a mound of material that approached sea level, the explosions could no longer be contained, and activity broke the surface. The first noticeable indications of volcanic activity were recorded at the seismic station in Surtr, Iceland from 6 to November 8, which detected weak tremors emanating from an epicenter approximately west-southwest at a distance of 140 kilometers, the location of Surtsey. Another station in Reykjavik recorded even weaker tremors for 10 hours on November 12 at an undetermined location, when seismic activity ceased until November 21. That same day, people in the coastal town of Heimaey 80 kilometers away noticed a smell of hydrogen sulfide. On November 13, a fishing vessel in search of herring, equipped with sensitive thermometers, noted sea temperatures 3.2 kilometers SW of the eruption center were 2.4 degrees Celsius higher than surrounding waters. Eruption at the surface. At 7:15 UTC on November 14, 1963, the cook of a Slifer 2, a trawler sailing these same waters, spotted a rising column of dark smoke southwest of the boat. The captain thought it might have been a boat on fire, and ordered the vessel to investigate. Instead, they encountered explosive eruptions giving off black columns of ash, indicating that a volcanic eruption had begun to penetrate the surface of the sea. By 11:00 the same day, the eruption column had reached several kilometers in height. At first the eruptions took place at 3 separate vents along a northeast by southwest trending fissure, but by the afternoon the separate eruption columns had merged into one along the erupting fissure. Over the next week, explosions were continuous, and after just a few days the new island, formed mainly of scoria, measured over 500 meters in length and had reached a height of 45 meters. As the eruptions continued, they became concentrated at one vent along the fissure and began to build the island into a more circular shape. By November 24, the island measured about 900 meters by 650 meters. The violent explosions caused by the meeting of lava and seawater meant that the island consisted of a loose pile of volcanic rock, which was eroded rapidly by North Atlantic storms during the winter. However, eruptions more than kept pace with wave erosion, and by February 1964, the island had a maximum diameter of over 1,300 meters. The explosive photomagmatic eruptions caused by the easy access of water to the erupting vents threw rocks up to a kilometer away from the island, and sent ash clouds as high as 10 kilometers up into the atmosphere. The loose pile of unconsolidated tufa would quickly have been washed away had the supply of fresh magma dwindled, and large clouds of dust were often seen blowing away from the island during this stage of the eruption. The new island was named after the fire jar paragraph jötunn Surtr from Norse mythology. 3 French journalists representing the magazine Paris Match notably landed there on December 6, 1963, staying for about 15 minutes before violent explosions encouraged them to leave. The journalists jokingly claimed French sovereignty over the island, but Iceland quickly asserted that the new island belonged to it. Permanent island. By early 1964, though, the continuing eruptions had built the island to such a size that seawater could no longer easily reach the vents, and the volcanic activity became much less explosive. Instead, lava fountains and flows became the main form of activity. These resulted in a hard cap of extremely erosion-resistant rock being laid down on top of much of the loose volcanic pile, which prevented the island from being washed away rapidly. Effusive eruptions continued until 1965, by which time the island had a surface area of 2.5 kilometers (2). On December 28, 1963, submarine activity 2.5 kilometers to the northeast of Surtsey caused the formation of a ridge 100 m high on the sea floor. This seamount was named Surtr, but never reached sea level. Eruptions at Surtr ended on January 6, 1964, and it has since been eroded from its minimum depth of 23 m to 47 m below sea level. Subsequent volcanic activity. In 1965 the activity on the main island diminished, but at the end of May that year an eruption began at a vent 0.6 kilometers off the northern shore. By May 28 an island had appeared, and was named Steadily. The new island was washed away during early June, but reappeared on June 14. Eruptions at Steadily were much smaller in scale than those that had built Surtsey, with the average rate of emission of volcanic materials being about a tenth of the rate at the main vent. Activity was short-lived, continuing until the beginning of October 1965, by which time the islet had an area of 0.15 kilometers (2). Once the eruptions had ceased, wave erosion rapidly wore the island away, and it disappeared beneath the waves on October 24. During December 1965, more submarine activity occurred 0.9 kilometers southwest of Surtsey, and another island was formed. It was named Jólnir, and over the following 8 months it appeared and disappeared several times, as wave erosion and volcanic activity alternated in dominance. Activity at Jólnir was much weaker than the activity at the main vent, and even weaker than that seen at Steadily, but the island eventually grew to a maximum size of 70 m in height, covering an area of 0.3 kilometers (2), during July and early August 1966. Like Steadily, though, after activity ceased on August 8, 1966, it was rapidly eroded, and dropped below sea level during October 1966. Effusive eruptions on the main island returned on August 19, 1966, with fresh lava flows giving it further resistance to erosion. The eruption rate diminished steadily, though, and on June 5, 1967, the eruption ended. The volcano has been dormant ever since. The total volume of lava emitted during the 3.5-year eruption was about 1 cubic kilometer, and the island's highest point was 174 meters above sea level at that time. Since the end of the eruption, erosion has seen the island diminish in size. A large area on the southeast side has been eroded away completely, while a sand spit called Norra jötunn has grown on the north side of the island. It is estimated that about 0.024 kilometers (3) of material has been lost due to erosion. This represents about a quarter of the original above sea level volume of the island. Its maximum elevation has diminished to 155 m. Recent development Following the end of the eruption, scientists established a grid of benchmarks against which they measured the change in the shape of the island. In the 20 years following the end of the eruption, measurements revealed that the island was steadily slumping vertically and had lost about 1 meter in height. The rate of slumping was initially about 20 centimeters per year but slowed to 1–2 centimeters a year by the 1990s. It had several causes: settling of the loose tufa forming the bulk of the volcano, compaction of seafloor sediments underlying the island, and downward warping of the lithosphere due to the weight of the volcano. The typical pattern of volcanism in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago is for each eruption site to see just a single eruption, and so the island is unlikely to be enlarged in the future by further eruptions. The heavy seas around the island have been eroding it ever since the island appeared, and since the end of the eruption almost half its original area has been lost. The island currently loses about 1.0 hectare of its surface area each year. Future equals. This island is unlikely to disappear entirely in the near future. The eroded area consisted mostly of loose tufa, easily washed away. Most of the remaining area is capped by hard lava flows, which are much more resistant to erosion. In addition, complex chemical reactions within the loose tufa within the island have gradually formed highly erosion-resistant tough material, in a process known as palagonetization. On Surtsey this process has happened quite rapidly, due to high temperatures not far below the surface. Estimates of how long Surtsey will survive are based on the rate of erosion seen up to the present day. Assuming that the current rate does not change, the island will be mostly at or below sea level by 2100. However, the rate of erosion is likely to slow as the tougher core of the island is exposed. An assessment assuming that the rate of erosion will slow exponentially suggests that the island will survive for many centuries. An idea of what it will look like in the future is given by the other small islands in the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago, which formed in the same way as Surtsey several thousand years ago, and have eroded away substantially since they were formed. Biology. Settlement of life equals a classic site for the study of biocolonization from founder populations that arrive from outside. Surtsey was declared a nature reserve in 1965 while the eruption was still in active progress. Today only a few scientists are permitted to land on Surtsey. The only way anyone else can see it closely is from a small plane. This allows the natural ecological succession for the island to proceed without outside interference. In 2008, UNESCO declared the island a World Heritage Site, in recognition of its great scientific value. Plant life. In the spring of 1965 the first vascular plant was found growing on the northern shore of Surtsey. Mosses became visible in 1967 and lichens were first found on the Surtsey lava in 1970. Plant colonization on Surtsey has been closely studied, the vascular plants in particular, as they have been of far greater significance than mosses, lichens and fungi in the development of vegetation. Mosses and lichens now cover much of the island. During the island's first 20 years, 20 species of plants were observed at one time or another, but only 10 became established in the nutrient-poor sandy soil. As birds began nesting on the island, soil conditions improved, and more vascular plant species were able to survive. In 1998, the first bush was found on the Iceland a tea-leaved willow, which can grow to heights of up to 4 meters. By 2008, 69 species of plant had been found on Surtsey, of which about 30 had become established. This compares to the approximately 490 species found on mainland Iceland. More species continue to arrive, at a typical rate of roughly 2–5 new species per year. Birds. The expansion of bird life on the island has both relied on and helped to advance the spread of plant life. Birds use the plants for nesting material, but also continue to assist in the spreading of seeds, and fertilize the soil with their guano. Birds first began nesting on Surtsey 3 years after the eruptions ended, with fulmar and guillemot the first species to set up home. 12 species are now regularly found on the island. A gull colony has been present since 1984, although gulls were seen briefly on the shores of the new island only weeks after it first appeared. The gull colony has been particularly important in developing the plant life on Surtsey, and the gulls have had much more of an impact on plant colonization than other breeding species due to their abundance. An expedition in 2004 found the first evidence of nesting Atlantic puffins, which are extremely common in the rest of the archipelago. as well as providing a home for some species of birds. Surtsey has also been used as a stopping-off point for migrating birds, particularly those en route between Europe and Iceland. Species that have been seen briefly on the island include whooper swans, various species of geese, and common ravens. Although Surtsey lies to the west of the main migration routes to Iceland, it has become a more common stopping point as its vegetation has improved. In 2008, the 14th bird species was detected with the discovery of a common raven's nest. According to a May 30, 2009 report, a golden plover was nesting on the island with 4 eggs. Marine life. Soon after the island's formation, seals were seen around the island. They soon began basking there, particularly on the northern spit, which grew as the waves eroded the island. Seals were found to be breeding on the island in 1983, and a group of up to 70 made the island their breeding spot. Grey seals are more common on the island than harbour seals, but both are now well established. The presence of seals attracts orcas, which are frequently seen in the waters around the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago and now frequent the waters around Surtsey. On the submarine portion of the island, many marine species are found. Starfish are abundant, as are sea urchins and limpets. The rocks are covered in algae, and seaweed covers much of the submarine slopes of the volcano, with its densest cover between 10 and 20 meters below sea level. Other life. Insects arrived on Surtsey soon after its formation, and were first detected in 1964. The original arrivals were flying insects, carried to the island by winds and their own power. Some were believed to have been blown across from as far away as mainland Europe. Later insect life arrived on floating driftwood, and both live animals and carcasses washed up on the island. When a large, grass-covered tussock was washed ashore in 1974, scientists took half of it for analysis and discovered 663 land invertebrates, mostly mites and springtails, the great majority of which had survived the crossing. The establishment of insect life provided some food for birds, and birds in turn helped many species to become established on the island. The bodies of dead birds provide sustenance for carnivorous insects, while the fertilization of the soil and resulting promotion of plant life provides a viable habitat for herbivorous insects. Some higher forms of land life are now colonizing the soil of Surtsey. The first earthworm was found in a soil sample in 1993, probably carried over from Heimaey by a bird. However, the next year earthworms were not found. Slugs were found in 1998, and appeared to be similar to varieties found in the southern Icelandic mainland. Spiders and beetles have also become established. Human impact. The only other significant human impact is a small prefabricated hut which is used by researchers while staying on the island. The hut includes a few bunk beds and a solar power source to drive an emergency radio and other key electronics. All visitors check themselves and belongings to ensure no seeds are accidentally introduced by humans to this ecosystem. It is believed that some young boys tried to introduce potatoes, which were promptly dug up once discovered. An improperly handled human defecation resulted in a tomato plant taking root which was also destroyed. In 2009 a weather station for weather observations and a webcam were installed on Surtsey. See also: Geography of Iceland, Iceland plume, List of islands of Iceland, List of new islands, List of volcanoes in Iceland, Volcanology of Iceland. References. External links: website of the Surtsey Research Society, weather observations on Surtsey, webcam on Surtsey, aerial photos, maps and volcanic geology of Surtsey. Visit Westman Islands, Surtsey topography, the Surtsey Research Society, which administers the island, a notice from the Environmental and Food Agency declaring Surtsey a protected area, Explore North site illustrates postage stamps. Extensive information about plant and bird life on the island.